As designers, it's important for us to understand the basics of how code for the web works, most specifically HTML and CSS. HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language, is a coding language that web browsers interpret in order to display the content of web pages. It consists of elements or building blocks that define the structure of the page. The markup language uses tags to define the parts of the content. HTML elements have tags, what we might call labels, inside of angled brackets. Here are some examples. A paragraph, various levels of headings, unordered lists or bulleted lists, list items, the individual bullet points, an image, or an anchor, what we more commonly think of as a link. Elements must have an opening and closing tag. The content to be displayed on the page is in between the tags. Here, only Hello World would be visible on the web page. HTML elements can have attributes that further define the structure. For instance, an image with the tag img can have image attributes such as source, alternate text, height, and width. HTML files must have defining HTML, head, and body tags in order for the browser to know how to read the file. The head contains information like the page title that appears in the browser tab, metadata, and keywords. The body contains the content that is displayed on the page. Notice the indented nature of the code, which helps to keep track of opening and closing tabs. You can see any web page's source files from the browser. You can also use the developer tools to experiment with selecting and changing different elements. The second important language for designers working on the web is CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. CSS is a coding language that determines the presentation of a web page, the colors, fonts, spacing, and layout. CSS also controls some animation and reformatting content for display on different devices. CSS works in tandem with HTML. The HTML holds the structure and the content. The CSS determines the presentation style. You add a link inside of the head section in the HTML to connect the CSS to the HTML file. CSS offers incredible flexibility and easy redesign. Instead of attaching style information in each and every tag in the HTML, a CSS selector matches up with the structural tag in the HTML. I could put font information in each and every paragraph tag in HTML, but imagine if you wanted to change the font on a page or a huge site. You'd have to find every single paragraph and change the font in each place. With CSS, I can define the font for all paragraphs on the page or site in one place. CSS allows the designer to quickly change the look and feel of a site without changing any of the content or underlying structure. CSS consists of a set of rules, including selectors, and their associated declaration blocks. Declaration blocks are defined by curly brackets and contain properties and values. So you have a selector name, then an opening curly bracket. Inside the bracket, you can define any number of properties, followed by a colon, and their values, ending in a semicolon. Once you've listed out all the properties you want to define, the declaration block is closed out with a curly bracket. If you hadn't noticed, punctuation in the code is essential. If you've got one missing slash, semicolon, curly bracket, or quote mark, the code won't work. Attention to detail is essential. The CSS selector matches up with a structural tag back in the HTML. So a P tag for paragraph is referenced in CSS as P. Then we see the variety of properties that we can define: font family, font weight, font style, font size, color, line height, and margin top, for example. Changing any one of these properties in the CSS will change the style of every paragraph across any linked pages. And now we get to the cascading part. I can create custom selectors that can modify the HTML tags. In HTML, you would call the custom name selector, such as .intro, in the class attribute inside of the p tag. The resulting display would show all of the CSS associated with the p selector, except for what is different or new in the custom selector. Here, the intro paragraph font will be bolder and larger, but keep the same font family, color, and line height of other paragraphs. Depending on the HTML element you are defining styles for, there are dozens of related properties, allowing endless presentation possibilities. Today, we took a quick look at some aspects of CSS and HTML. HTML consists of elements with attributes that define the structure of the page and content surrounded by open and close tags. CSS uses selectors with properties and values that determine the presentation of the page. And for our takeaway, command of HTML and CSS provides flexibility and endless design possibilities. Explore the code behind the web this week.